Welcome back to Toy Thursday with Johnny Tiger. The date is June 4th, 2020, week number 14 of the coronavirus staying at home, social distancing. Uh, but even though the world is seemingly falling apart all around us, we still need to indulge our geeky side and find time to do what we like to do. In my case, collect toys, action figures, weapons, various items. In front of you, are seeing on this weird looking contraption is the action figure of Elizabeth from the BioShock Infinite video game. Let's not talk about Elizabeth first. I want to show you what this contraption is. This thing started out being one of those old credit card machine. I had one. I bought this actually when I first started working independently as a counselor, and more clients wanted to pay by credit card. Back then, I didn't really have PayPal, and a lot of them didn't really have PayPal either, and we didn't have Apple Pay or all this cool stuff. So I bought one of these. So you swipe the card, and it keeps a carbon copy. I'm sure you guys seen this on taxis, and some of you old enough to remember these machines. Well, nowadays we mostly use PayPal or e-transfer or Apple Pay, so this became pointless. And it was just sitting in my drawer. Uh, but I was thinking, what should I do with this? It just seemed like a shame to throw something like this away. Back then it was kind of expensive to buy. Uh, so I thought, well, I added a wired stand on top of it, and now it can be used to support action figures during review, especially action figures like Elizabeth here that refuses to stand up. The advantage is, of course, I can easily move the figure closer to the camera without actually having to fiddling with balancing it or anything. Now let's talk about Elizabeth. For those of you who were like me, never played the BioShock video game, didn't know anything about BioShock Infinite. In BioShock Infinite, Elizabeth grew up as a kidnapped child in a different dimension. So, long story short, when she was very little, someone came from a different dimension, kidnapped her, took her to uh, their city, and raised her as their own daughter, and tried to groom her to become the Messiah, the one person that's going to purify the city because of her superpower. And when she grew up, she started to rebel against them. So they put a limiter in her brain, sort of, and that limit the use of her superpower, so she couldn't rebel against them. What was her superpower, you might ask? Well, Elizabeth, it turned out, had the ability to maneuver dimension and time. She could randomly open up rifts to go to anywhere in any dimension in any time. She was effectively a one-woman time-traveling dimension hopping machine. And because of that power, she also had the ability to know the future and know the past. So that gave her a lot of power. She also was able to use her psionic ability to change people's thought, to mind control other people. Sounds really impressive. However, throughout most of the game, her only function was really just to be your sidekick and to be the damsel in distress that you have to rescue. And she occasionally would give you knowledge for your character to be able to advance in the game, and she would help pick lock and stuff like that. She's also a very skilled uh, thief or lock picking or uh, decoder uh, and all that stuff. Just like the story of Rapunzel, the people that kidnapped her kept her locked up in a tower without access to the outside world. So growing up, Elizabeth had nothing to do but read, 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 and learn a lot of things. That's how she knew how to crack code and pick lock and stuff like that. The action figure of Elizabeth, for those of you who are blind and can't see the screen, she stands about 6.25 inches tall. She's very, very skinny. She has short, dark hair. She is a pretty, fairly attractive woman in a blue jacket and blue dress, a blue skirt with white trim. And under her jacket, she's wearing kind of a white uh, camisole or uh, whatever you would call that, that people back in the early 19th centuries would wear. I think it's called camisole. Uh, on her right hand, I don't know if you guys would be able to make it out on the camera. Let me bring her closer. She is missing her pinky finger. Uh, she lost her pinky finger during the kidnap attempt. It got cut off during the kidnap attempt when she was little. Apparently, that was also the source of her superpower. She is very detailed. Again, I'm not sure if you guys would be able to make it out, but the freckles on her face, uh, the clothing, it's all very well done on this action figure. Her skirt is soft fabric, like uh, high-end or like a doll, actually. This kind of material is rare to see on action figures, and the material is actually really nice on her skirt. It's kind of like velvet. Really nice, really soft to touch, and not cheap at all. And I'm going to do something here that seems a bit pervy, but it's not, I promise. But I'm sure everyone who get an action figure with a soft skirt going to at one time or another do something like this. If you lift up her skirt, you will see that no, there's nothing erotic going on here. Uh, thank you. Nothing erotic going on here. She's got very old-fashioned bloomers uh, sculpted on her under her skirt. So yeah, it's strictly PG at the most. Nothing to see. Move on, move on. Now, most people I've spoken to and most review I've read have nothing but good thing to say about this action figure. Everything I've been saying up to this point. Really well sculpted, a lot of details, really well made, and the character in the game was pretty interesting. So what do I think of this action figure? This is one of the most boring action figure in my collection. Honestly, it's a short-haired girl in a blue dress. No weapon, no accessory, nothing. She can't really do much other than just stand around in the back of the display. Pretty much uh, not a very good example of uh, feminine power. She's basically just there to look pretty and look okay in a backdrop, while other action figures get interesting things to do. I mean, it's just not a lot you can do with a short-haired woman in a blue dress that doesn't really have anything special about her. By the way, I don't know if you guys can make it out, but her head is actually a little bit too large. She has this kind of a cartoonish proportion to her, which I believe was actually accurate to her depiction in the game. But again, not being a player of BioShock, never played the game, not really interested in the story that much, that doesn't really mean that much to me. All I know is this action figure by feel, by texture, by tactile, is a very boring action figure, very boring female action figure with a very skinny build and a very overly large head. Definitely not something that I felt worth the $20 I paid. So, what happened? Why did I get her? Why did I get this action figure if I wasn't interested in the game? And did I just read all the good reviews about her and decided to take a gamble and then got disappointed? Is that uh, one of those sad story of buyer's remorse? Sometimes, any other time, you might be correct in assuming that. But in this case, no. I knew what I was getting. When I picked Elizabeth up at Amazon, I knew that she wasn't going to be all that fun. I knew she was just going to stand around in the back of the shelf, back of the display, not doing anything. So why did I get her? Well, this takes us back to uh, the process of deciding what action figure to get. In my lifetime, I've gone through three stages of collecting. Stage number one, we can call that pre-teen. So before I was a teenager, when my mom was the one that would go get me toys and would pay for them and stuff like that. Pre-teen stage, uh, I would just buy whatever felt cool. My mom back then had a lot of money to spend on toys. So every time she took me shopping with her, rather than keeping me with her and dealing with me whining and saying I'm thirsty, I'm hungry, I'm bored, my mom would uh, basically uh, take me to a toy shop, take me to a toy store, and then she would tell the people that work there, uh, my son can't see, so please let him open up the packages and feel, and I'll pay for anything he buy, and of course I'll pay for uh, uh, packages that he opened, and even if he doesn't like them, I'll still pay for them, and you guys can still keep the ones that he doesn't like. My family had enough money back then for my mom to make that kind of promise. Basically, show my son anything you have, and whatever he like, we'll buy. And whatever he rejects, you guys can keep, but we'll still pay you the money for going through the trouble of opening the boxes. So, toy store in my city, in the city I grew up in, not my city, but the city I grew up in, toy store owners loved me. Every time I came to their store, I was like the special guest. They would take me to the back room and then sit me down at a table, and they would bring me all the newest action figures, newest Transformers, newest G.I. Joes, newest action figures, and they would open them up, and they would sit down and explain to me, this character is so and so, and this is his weapon, and this fits together this way, this fits together that way, and so on and so on. And I would basically spend the entire afternoon in the back room of the toy store, uh, being surrounded by toys and people who knew toys, and get to pass time that way. And would usually come home with a lot of uh, cool action figures. So back then, for me to buy an action figure, there was not a lot of criteria. I didn't care what cartoon they were from. I didn't care what show they were from, as long as they felt cool to my fingers, to my touch. As long as the store owner could make a good pitch and tell me how cool the character was, then it was a sale. Of course, wasn't spending my own money. I didn't have to be all that selective. The second stage of my collection was my teenage years, and I've talked about this briefly in the past, how my younger brother Peter and Peter basically acted as my eyes in the store, and he would tell me, "Oh, get this one looks really cool," and "Oh yeah, you wanted to know what the Incredible Hulk feels like, th you should get this one." That was basically one of the two ways we decided what action figure to get. Another way that Peter and I would make a selection was depending on what we needed in our tabletop gaming. As I said, I often think that Peter and I were like the grandfather, the pioneers of using action figures in tabletop games. So quite often we would go by, okay, our story need a troll. So let's go to the toy store and look for a troll. And if we can't find a troll, then we find something or some action figure that could look sort of like one. Uh, the Incredible Hulk was really, really useful for that. Uh, if we needed a warrior in armor, then we go to the store with the express purpose of looking for an action figure that could fill that role in our tabletop gaming. Um, so that was two ways we would select action figures. Then now we move forward to stage number three, my current collection method. My current way of deciding what action figure to get basically has three uh, categories, three things that go through my head when I decide if I am going to get a new action figure. One is to complete a set. Let's say I have Batman and Robin, and even though I'm not really all that interested in Alfred, uh, the butler, because he's just a butler. He doesn't do anything. Again, he's just another uh, generic, ordinary kind of human that's going to hang in the background, not doing anything. But I may decide to get Alfred anyway because uh, that's what needed to complete the Batman display on my shelf. Let's say I have uh, Shredder from the Ninja Turtle, which I do. You guys may get to see him sometime. Um, I may decide to get Rocksteady and Bebop, even though I'm not interested in them, but Shredder needs his henchmen. So that's method one of my making selection. Method two is to learn what characters look like. Let's say I'm watching The Lord of the Rings, and I really like a certain character. Let's say I really like the dwarf, but I don't have an action figure of him. So after watching the show, I may go out and specifically hunt down an action figure of the dwarf. If not that dwarf, I might just look for one that's more or less similar, uh, just so I have an idea of how to envision that character in my mind. So you can say method number two is curiosity and education. But why did I get Elizabeth when I already knew she was going to be really, really boring? And I'm not a big fan of the game. The reason is method number three. I don't know how many collectors do this, but I call method number three mind casting. Mind casting. And what it means is since I don't have a lot of time to sit there and uh, uh, sort out and going through and review my collection all the time, I learned to think of them in my head, in my mind, depending on what I'm doing. Let me make this a little bit more clear. This is to say that yes, I'm not playing with my toys, but when I am watching a movie or when I'm listening to an audiobook, depending on the character that happened in the story, in my head, I'm going through almost a casting process. Oh, this character sounds like he could be the same as Superman, maybe the same size, the same general shape. So in my head, I'm putting the action figure of Superman in the role of that character in the story I'm currently paying attention to. If I'm reading a Western story, then I'm going to look through my memory. In my head, I'm going, which action figure in my collection can fit the general description of Billy the Kid? By the way, this mind casting is also my method of counting sheep when I can't sleep. If I can't sleep, sometimes I'm going to say, okay, um, in in this movie, in the Gladiator, okay, I don't have any action figure of character from the Gladiator movie, but so I'm going to use the Gladiator as an example. So if I can't sleep, I'm laying in bed awake, tossing and turning. I start going through my mind casting process. I say, okay, in Gladiator, which one of my action figure would fit the bill of Maximus? Which action figure would fit the bill of uh, 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 Commodus or whatever the villain's name was, I can't remember. But you get the idea. I'm going to go through my checklist in my head of all my action figures and find the one that fits the role of whatever movie or book I'm thinking about. Just a little mind game I play with myself to keep me entertained with my action figure. So that is why I acquired Elizabeth, because in my entire collection, I don't have a woman dressed in the retro 19th century style. So if I was listening to a Western uh, book, or if I was watching a Western movie, and there's a Western female character that I need to mind cast for, I come up blank because I just don't have any, I didn't have anyone in my collection that would fit that kind of outfit or that kind of appearance. So I got Elizabeth to fill that void in my collection. So now we have uh, a female action figure that dressed like she's from 1905, uh, and she is definitely unique in that sense. Even though, yeah, she's still really boring. Thank you for checking out this week's Toys Thursday. We'll be back again tomorrow for Fitness Friday. For now, have fun, stay safe, and have a good night.